We're going to start the day's insights with Reinventing the Arts, taking a look into how technology is impacting creativity. The panel's host is Tim Plyming, Director of Digital Arts and Media at Nesta. So please welcome him and the panellists to the stage.
Hi there, morning everyone. I hope we can have a really interesting time this morning looking at this subject, which is the subject I'm most passionate about and interested about and love to chat about. So I hope we are going to have a very nice just conversation together. As ever in this field, it feels like it's sort of you and us, but by the end of the session I hope we will have all had a really interesting discussion. So the way we're gonna plan this, we're going to have some opening thoughts and some stuff that I think will frame our discussion, and then quite quickly what I'd like to do is to get into the things that we think we wanted to discuss together, and there'll be microphones coming around. Look, an amazing panel of people to start us off this morning and to start our conversation, and three people who I respect hugely, who I think are really making this happen in the arts and cultural sector, and have CVs that really prove that they're not only able to think about it, have a think about where it's going, but also deliver it as well. And I think that's really important, and it is a really, I mean, this whole conference is an amazing lineup, but for this session, it's amazing to have Anthony Lilley with us. Anthony's the CEO, he's the Chief Creative Officer of Magic Lantern. Anthony has also been helping the BBC and Arts Council England rethink the next chapter for the space, which is a really exciting collaboration right at the heart of our conversation this morning. And Anthony's got that into a place that I think is a really exciting next chapter for the space. Conrad Bodman is at the BFI. He looks after international relations and the relationships that help the UK speak globally in terms of film. And Conrad is one of those people that when I started my job at Nesta, everyone said you've got to go and meet Conrad, because he's not only able to really effectively talk about the challenges, but he is brilliantly dealing with those as well, and is able to match kind of what he's doing against what he's saying. And Tom Circe, who is Director at Mbryonic, and Tom, you're going to be telling us a bit about the work you do, particularly with VR and thinking about how some of these emerging or very quickly being established technologies will help the arts and cultural sector do their job even better. So it's amazing three people that we've got to speak. What I thought I'd do is ask them to do around 5 minutes just to think about this subject that we're looking at, reinventing the arts, thinking about how arts and culture can move into a new chapter with this emerging technology that we are starting to see. I personally believe we're in something of another industrial revolution, and I think we'll look back and sort of see this as a moment that we actually move into a whole new way of behaving as human beings, and that in this session we're going to look at what that means for the arts. So in this session on reinventing the arts, I thought if I asked the three guys to speak for 5 minutes, and then we'll start to have a discussion and start to do some questions. There's a few opening thoughts. Before Christmas, I had an operation which meant that I was in proper recovery, like flat on a bed for 4 weeks. And it's the first time as an adult I've experienced it. And it's quite a shock to the system when you experience that. So, and my wife said to me, well, it'd be amazing because you were to catch up on all of that stuff that, you haven't been able to see and all that stuff you wanted to record. So by day 2, I'd got totally bored of Netflix, and I'd seen everything that I wanted to see on iPlayer. I was restricted to what I was able to consume on a tablet, on my mobile, and if I could just about lift my head up on the stuff that I could see on the big screen. So there I was in central London, an unbelievably fast internet connection. All of the plays, all of the concerts that I'd planned to see before Christmas, I had to cancel. So I'm an amazing fan of a folk artist called Kate Rusby. She does an amazing Christmas show. She booked the Union Chapel in North London. I was booked to go and see it. And I'm thinking, really, why can't I, on an unbelievable fast internet connection with a 4K TV, why can't I sit and watch that show in 4K. I mean, Kate sells her tour out within about 2 days. So there must be enough other people who are willing to pay 10 or 20 quid to see that. And then, of course, I'm, then really sort of quite quickly realising how much nonsense there is really on social media. So suddenly I'm sort of, without realising it, I've spent an hour on Facebook just looking at people doing up their Christmas trees at Christmas parties, making Christmas puddings. And I'm thinking, the narrative there is so bland. I mean, I'm very bland on Facebook, but I mean, my friends are even blander on Facebook. And I'm thinking, why is that experience so bland? Why can't there be more narrative? Why can't people be taking the mickey out of what's going on? So I'm finding that all very sort of bland, really. And then I realised the people who really have got this, have got multi-channel and have really got the way of targeting me really well are retail. So the people that were really getting this right were retail. And one of the things that I think Conrad is going to speak about, and I'd like us to get into our discussion, is how retail not only understands me lying on my bed at home and how to engage with me, but then of course when I walk into store, the really, really bright thinkers in retail are starting to take the relationship they have with me in the digital space, start to take that into the physical space as well. And so suddenly I'm really thinking what the challenge for the arts really is I think other people are starting to sort of work out how to engage with this new environment we're in. And yet I look at arts and culture and I think it's not linked together, it's sporadic, we don't really understand audiences. And it means that really in that 4-week period I engaged with arts and culture very little. In this funny state I was, restricted to mobile and tablet, I engaged with arts and culture very little, and yet it's where my passion is. And why is that? And what are the building blocks that need to be put in place? So that's the stuff that I'd like us to chuck around and think about or disagree with in our session. But to start us off, the first person I'm going to ask to come and share some thoughts based on his amazing experience in this area is Conrad from the BFI. Conrad, we're going to go right the way through. Conrad will be followed by Tom, Tom by Anthony, and then we're going to start having an interesting discussion, I hope. So please join me in welcoming Conrad to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. It's very nice to be here. I've just come back from Australia, so I'm kind of suffering some body shock at the moment because it was 40 degrees where I was. So I'm going to show you some kind of images. I hope this works. Yes. I currently work at the BFI. I'm kind of head of international relationships. I've got a brief around the whole digital innovation space at the BFI too. So I run a number of events at the BFI, kind of exploring different aspects of digital creativity. But I've been kind of working in this field for quite a long time now, and I started off as a curator at the Barbican Centre around 2000. And even back in those days, we were beginning to address the digital. So it's not, these things have been happening for a long time. The first big show we did at the Barbican was called Serious Games, which really addressed sort of digital culture kind of internationally and what contemporary artists were doing in that space. But the big show that I worked on that came after that in 2002 was a video games exhibition called Game On, which was the first sort of exhibition sort of exploring the world of video games kind of from the 60s to the present day at that point. And the show's been touring around ever since. It's been seen by several million people. It's been touring around for kind of 12 years and has been a huge success. So I'd like to kind of talk a little bit about video games today as part of the discussion, because they tend to kind of get sidelined quite often when we're involved in cultural discussions, and I'm very passionate about them. This was another show called Game Masters that I developed at the Australian Centre for the Moving Image in 2012, which again was an exploration of the history of video games, but with a real focus on a series of key auteurs. So often we know the games, but we don't know the people, and I'm very passionate about communicating the kind of creative work that individuals do in the digital space, who are often kind of subsumed within the kind of concept of or the idea. So that was Game Masters. Ooh, and I can't advance it now for some reason. Can you click me along, whoever's kind of clicking? Oh, there we are. So these are some installation shots of the show. You can see works that are framed on the wall. So this is another kind of key issue, I think, for curators kind of working with digital media in gallery spaces. Is how do we show the legacy of kind of screen-based kind of content? And there is a lot of analog process that goes on in the making of digital works. So I think galleries play a key part in kind of showcasing this work. Can we have the next slide? Yes, so this is some work by Tim Schafer, for any of you who are involved in the video games world, really key kind of auteur video game developer. And as you can see, we're showing a mixture of games and kind of analog artwork. You can keep on going through the images kind of as I speak. Did a lot of work in the digital space at Acme in Melbourne, and then came back to London in 2012, 13, and started work on a big exhibition called Digital Revolution, which was held at the Barbican Centre. You can see some of the work here. So that exhibition was really a kind of huge showcase looking at the history of digital arts from the late 1950s all the way up to the present day through a series of kind of major kind of commissions. Looking at the work of people like Susan Kerr, who was involved in designing Mac Paint, which is a really important kind of free product, which came free with the Apple Mac. Some of the unsung stories, we think of Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak and their roles, but obviously there was a kind of a mixed team of people working on the Apple Mac. And also sort of the exhibition addressed various kind of other aspects of digital creativity. So we're looking at contemporary art, design, film, music, and video games. So looking at this very kind of broad spectrum kind of digital arts, and really providing that sort of analog gallery-based experience. I've worked a lot in kind of ticketed shows. So as a curator, kind of my objective is to get people to come into spaces to see work. And I think it'd be great to sort of have a chat later about, how the online and the kind of physical space kind of link together in that way and kind of cross-pollinate. I think that's really important. So we did a series of major commissions for this exhibition, working with people like Usman Haq from Mbryonic, who produced a fantastic kind of laser work kind of in the pit theatre at the Barbican that sort of really allowed you to engage physically with a series of kind of lasers, which is kind of very dynamic work. Work with other artists like Matt Pike, Marshmallow Laser Feast. I'm sure we'll talk about some of these creative groups later. One of the interesting things about this area is a lot of the creative practitioners that are working in it sit across the commercial and the public sector. So they're not really served by the commercial art gallery space, but often work in advertising, major events, and also show their work in museums and galleries. And I think that's a very different kind of approach from most contemporary artists. I think it's sort of worth talking about. One of the big things about this area is it's very financially kind of risky, for institutions. So I think when one's commissioning work, you need to be really careful and make sure that the idea is really strong, powerful, and engaging. But I think institutions, certainly over the last kind of since 2008, have become much more risk averse, and I think it's important to take risk in commissioning work. A lot of the work that was commissioned for this show wouldn't have happened kind of otherwise. So let's talk a bit about risk too. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tom Circe. As an introduction, I run a company called Mbryonic, and we're essentially a digital design agency. We're specialising in interactive digital media, which covers all kinds of stuff from installations and apps and virtual reality, which is a particular interest. So a little bit about my background. We take creative technology applied, but there's another one. If we go to the next slide. Is that right? Yeah, magic through technology. So I'm a child of Clive Sinclair, not literally, obviously, but I was born into that generation, the first kids who had a computer at home, and I was kind of awestruck by the fact I could do something on it, and then some light came on, or something happened on a TV screen, and really this is what I try to capture in the work that we do, is that kind of sense of wonder. And so when I did that as a kid, and when I started off, logical thing was kind of working in the video games industry. So I worked at companies like Sega and Eidos, and at the time, working in the video games industry, it wasn't really a career path that most people considered. But again, it was just something I did, from a very early age, from the age of 10, programming and going on, and then sort of, through throughout my career, I've just kind of done things that I'm interested in and managed to get away with it. I did some stuff in digital innovation at companies like Orange, and then more recently set up my own practice. And this has been quite an interesting period because we've seen the emergence of new technologies, for instance, like virtual reality. And I thought this is a particularly interesting area because it's a new media form. So we've done a few VR projects. First one we did was actually this one, as you can see on the screen, which was with the Sage in Gateshead. And for the 10th anniversary, they wanted to have some celebration, so they had a big concert go on, and they had the musicians come in and play the building, literally just hitting the building and seeing what noises it makes. And we created a kind of virtual version of this. So we remodeled the space at the Sage. People could fly around through it and then listen to the sounds that we recorded there and create their own pieces of music. We've done that. We did another piece, which is actually downstairs. I don't know if you checked it out yet. It's called Veil, and this was originally shown at the Barbican. We spent some time at Fish Island Labs, which was a kind of program set up by the Barbican and the Trampery to help sort of a new generation of digital artists. Though I've never really considered myself a digital artist. I'm just a programmer who likes tinkering things. And so we created this project in collaboration with another company, another artist who's a visual artist, and we created a thing called Veil. Do check it out. So the idea is it's a site-specific work. So everywhere we take it, we have to adapt it to a new place, which is actually a bit of a practical annoyance. But that's the way we conceived it. Because the interesting thing we thought when we were thinking about sort of VR and digital arts was you can experience this, and I guess we can talk about this, but you can experience it online or you can experience it at home, but what actually value does it bring to take it back into the gallery? So again, working on this idea of modeling real spaces, what we do in Veil is that we model the space that you're in. So when you put on a headset, you're back in the gallery. But then we start to subvert things and do things that you can't normally do in a real gallery or real art. And I won't spoil it for you because it's kind of best, there's a few surprises in there, it's just best you have a go at it. So the other part of my life, I've kind of been a musician for a long time, and I've kind of had a moderately successful career as a sort of underground electronic music artist. And so I've kind of been involved in creativity in that side as well. And one of my main projects this year, I'm working with Columbia Records, and I'm creating a tool that allows musicians to create their own virtual reality musical gigs or experiences. I say gigs in the loosest form because part of the process we're going to be exploring what it is to do a virtual reality performance. There's a lot of obviously work with people who are doing stuff with 360 video, and 360 video is amazing at reproducing something that already is already happening. But once we get rid of that barrier, what could we do in virtual space during a musical? And so this is kind of like, I guess, a culmination of two parts of my lives coming together. And so 2006 should be an exciting year. I look forward to chatting about the rest. Oh, I didn't show the rest of my slides. Maybe do you want to flick through those? Oh, yeah. So we've done some real-time visuals. We do like projection mappings for things like Glastonbury. Next one. Oh, yes. And we've worked with kind of interactive, kind of digital music performances. This is a fantastic band called Tin Man and the Telephone, and they're a Dutch band, and people use mobile phones to interact with them while they play. So they might tell them to play faster or slower, or they play games. And there's actually a really magical bit they have where they use the speaker in the mobile phone as a kind of a loudspeaker system. So he'll play something on the piano, and then it will kind of ripple through the audience as it goes through. It's really magical. And we worked with them to do so they can control flying around the stage gatehead as they were playing. And then the last one, this is maybe just interesting. We do a lot of collaboration, so we also work with a company called Atom Hawk, which are based in Newcastle, a fantastic concept design company. And they had a bunch of illustrations, and this is quite interesting where we kind of interacted with an audience. So they had a bunch of illustrations. We wanted to create a kind of interactive storybook, but we didn't have a story. So what we did is we created a platform that allowed the public to write their own stories to the illustrations. We ran a competition, and we had entries from all around the world, so they could just go online, select the audio for the images, start to write their own prose, and that's something that we're hoping to release at some point in the near future.
Morning, still morning, yes. I'm Anthony Lilley. I'm not going to put any slides. That's nothing to do with me. That's Tom. I think I'm probably some combination of producer, strategist, and creative. And rather like Tom, I managed to get away so far in about 20 years in so-called new media with mostly finding interesting projects. At its peak, Magic Lantern was a 60-person agency. We decided to not be that anymore after the financial crash. That was quite a challenging thing to do. But my original background is in theatre and tinkering with technology at the same time, and I find myself sort of back there to some extent. As Tim said, for the last year or so, I've been initially a strategy advisor and then the interim CEO of the space, while we've been developing a revised/new strategy for it, and hiring a new team of people and commissioning some sort of interesting pilot projects for it. And that's the first time I've been a commissioner, which has been interesting and a very good learning experience. But broadly, I sort of sit across the commercial and the arts world, so I've been everything from the digital strategy advisor to Top Gear internationally, and at the same time the digital strategy advisor to the English National Opera, which was cognitive dissonance some days. That's led me into all sorts of creative endeavours, which have usually allowed me to work out what I'm not terribly good at during each one, and sometimes what I'm quite okay at, which latterly have included, in going to Tim's sort of opening, everything from executive producing a cinema screening of a large-scale opera with Terry Gilliam, which I'll tell you about over a drink sometime, through to being the creative consultant on a West End production at the Donmar Warehouse called Privacy, which was a show which had live interaction within it. And more latterly, a bunch of stuff in apps and in VR at the Space, where we'll shortly launch a 360 version of the Royal Academy's Ai Weiwei, the blockbuster Ai Weiwei exhibition, which will be launched in a couple of weeks' time, which is explorable online on iPad, and if you've got a Samsung Gear or a cardboard in virtual reality, as a kind of super-powered exhibition. I've also been involved in PlayStation games, television shows. When my mum says, "What's your job?" she still doesn't know. I still don't really know. But it is broadly somewhere around where you bridge creativity and technology and challenging things together. And that leads me into certain sort of strategy conversations. I've advised Nesta, and I regularly advise the Arts Council and the BBC on these sorts of topics. So I'm sort of interested in this area. And I think I probably came to the conclusion about a decade ago that digital transformation in all sectors was broadly similar. It had categories that were to do with either distributing your existing product digitally, into which I would put live streaming of product or capture of product or cinema screenings of shows, and equally I would have put the work that some of us were involved in the early days of Channel 4 On Demand and the iPlayer and those sorts of things. So that's a category which the space now calls capture, a category which the space now calls extend, which is to do with getting to the core of an existing artistic idea and really understanding what the intention of the artist or the organisation is, and then seeing what technology can do to augment that, to enhance that. And that is, for instance, something like the Ai Weiwei exhibition, where you're extending the reach of that show, but also you're extending the depth of the user's experience of it. And then the thing I'm probably most interested in is what the space calls create or landmark projects, which actually go into the bigger topic, which I think is underpinning Tim's opening speech, which is how do you do art in this context? What is art for? We can do PhDs on that, but how do you do the thing formerly known as art using technology in this way? How do you surprise? How do you challenge? How do you shock? How do you awe people? I played the best video game I've ever played. I played Journey with my 7-year-old. If you haven't played Journey, I thoroughly recommend you play Journey. It's a 2-hour-long video game with literally no point, and it is the most glorious thing. It is a journey. It is human life. At the end of it, my 7-year-old suddenly realised, "We're going to die, Dad," he said. "And you do. And then you're reborn." So you can do art, as Conrad is a much greater exponent of and much more knowledgeable on than I am. You can do the things art can do. It's just mostly digital media doesn't. Because mostly it's about efficiency. Mostly it's about ease. It's about personalisation, which is a code for laziness. in some settings, or a code for wonderful new opportunities. So artistically at the moment, and this is not commissioned yet, I'm working with a well-known filmmaker who made a film about some dwarves who travelled in time, won't tell you his name, never quite makes a film about Don Quixote. We're working on a project at the moment which is all about encouraging people to think for themselves in the context of the internet, to think artistically, to take an artistic perspective and go beyond the efficiency. What would happen, for instance, if Terry Gilliam recommended the books instead of Amazon's algorithm based on who liked something? What would happen if the films you watched were at least partly determined by the thing you totally shouldn't watch, that you would not have been recommended by Netflix? And those are very simple sort of programmatic things, but that's the interesting area, I think, for me in terms of what an artistic perspective can do. And to close, I think that's very challenging for funded regimes. It's less challenging, interestingly, for commercial products which reach a certain scale. If you're working on something like Top Gear, I worked on Doctor Who for a while. The three phases I mentioned earlier are fairly straightforward. You do your Doctor Who on telly, you put it on the iPlayer, that's capture and distribute sort of activity. You extend it by having websites and you watch what your fans do when they knit Daleks and then sell which they do, and then sell the patterns online. And then you really get into the interesting stuff about what does it mean to do Doctor Who in an interactive way, and who for and what audience. And in that, I would slightly challenge this notion that it's an emerging new space. I think what we do have that we didn't have when I started, certainly, was a great deal more data about user behaviour. The way we make products responds to that now. Agile methodologies, the way you can get products out quickly. When I started this, it would take 9 months to get something into the market, by which point everything had changed. So the ability to be responsive and quick is really helpful, but also the ability to listen to what we're being told by user behaviour and amend what we're doing. And that feels quite artistic to me. I found myself in a kind of slightly theological conversation with a great adherent of Agile. I'm a great fan of this stuff, but I'm not a cult member, and there are some people who are. Describing Agile as being a bit like theatrical rehearsal, I was trying to say, well, this is how we used to make plays. When I made plays, you would sort of stand up in the morning in a rehearsal room, all talk about what you did yesterday. You'd all decide where you got to. You'd determine what you were going to do today, and by the end of the day, the bit you'd worked on was a bit better and potentially publicly presentable. And then you'd get to what you might call an MVP, which we called a dress rehearsal, or a run-through. So in fact, there's nothing new. In fact, what's happened is the technological development paradigm has become more creative, certainly in my 20 years. So I think that is a really interesting moment for us, those of us who are interested in this sort of topic. But the big challenge is money. At the space, you can't. The cost of entry of a virtual reality coverage of a major exhibition is colossal compared to most arts funding. Colossal, not opera. I have to say, I had £1 million a show for opera, but that's not real life. But certainly even for plays, it's completely extraordinary. The cost of doing an app. I commissioned Blast Theory to do an app called Karen, which has won a bunch of awards around the world. It's an interactive narrative app in your hand. That was broadly equivalent to commissioning a play in terms of cost and in terms of audience, very interestingly. One of the things I've been working really hard on is at the space, and then I'll pass over to the others, is trying to understand what a good result is for something like that. If you spend 100,000, which is roughly what we spent on something of that scale to reach commercial product quality, which is a lot, but not, by the way, as much as you would spend on a play at the Donmar Warehouse, which would be 4 times that. If you spend that sort of money, what sort of audience is a good audience? And in the case of Karen, it's been about 15,000 users. So £6 or £7 actually per user sounds like an enormous amount of money. If you knew, as I happen to, what the cost of an RSC seat is to the public purse, or what the cost of a seat at the ENO is to the public purse, God forbid, you would know that's actually quite comparable. In fact, it's rather good value for money. So understanding the kind of value of what you do, not just the cost, is important. So I do quite a lot of work trying to get Arts Council, Innovate UK, and those sorts of, and help Tim as well sometimes at Nesta, with building the kind of narrative for how you've done a good job here as much as anything else. So that's my perspective on it. Hopefully we'll have a fun chat in a moment.
Guys, thank you so much. That has got us started amazingly. Look, what I'm going to do is ask a couple of questions, which I'd love the three of you to give your wisdom on. And then for these, and then generally, you know, I know this feels slightly sort of stage audience, but I'd like it not to be like that in half an hour. So I'd love you just to put your hand in the air if you've got something you'd love to throw in and contribute. Help us. Some microphones will come round and help us just tell us who you are, and because you know who we are, so we'd love to know who you are. So tell us who you are and kind of what you're up to at the moment. Let's start with a couple of things. Look, I'm really interested in this mix, Conrad. You were speaking about the you know, our digital environment and our physical environment, and I would say generally in arts and culture, you know, those two things live quite separately at the moment. It's partly how organisations are structured, but we're not in this kind of simultaneous kind of environment. So what I'd love the three of you really is to think, you know, one thing you'd love to see happen, or one thing you think is going to happen over the next 5 years. And what are the things that need to be in place, either structurally in organisations, financially, theologically, that need to be in place to sort of stop us thinking about these worlds as, well, that department does that, you know, got one audience for the BFI, and, you know, I suspect the BFI is one of those traditional organisations where one team sort of look after that type of audience and another team look after that kind of audience, and, you know, occasionally we might get together, but we don't think of them as one kind of unit. So what kind of needs to happen for us to kind of come to a world where this is properly convergent? Conrad, let's start with you, and then guys, other panels, and then I'd love then some hands in the air. If we don't have some hands, I'm going to start picking on people, you know, the nice woman with the red jacket or whatever. Conrad, you start.
Yeah, I think it might be interesting to just talk a little bit about some of the BFI projects that we're working on. So we've got a big lottery-funded program going on at the moment called Unlocking Film Heritage, which is allowing us to digitise 10,000 film titles kind of in our collection, which are all home movies. And we've made those all available through a platform called Britain on Film, which is a map-based interface which allows you to click on the town that you're from and pull up, you know, the moving image content that we have digitized in our archive, kind of that speaks about that place. And it's a very kind of it's a beautiful. I recommend you to take a look at it. This links with another kind of platform that we've got, which is called BFI Player, which is a video-on-demand service, which has both free and pay-per-view kind of content, but is now a subscription service. And it would be good to talk about subscription, actually, like during this conversation. But these two kind of things are interlinked to allow subscribers to access free and paid-for kind of content, which really sort of, you know, allows access to a real wealth of material from our archive, which was impossible to access kind of previously without you having to travel to Berkhamsted and access the material kind of at our National Film Archive kind of conservation centre. So I think the sort of bringing together of the analogue and digital resources through kind of online interfaces is, you know, fantastic kind of innovation for an organisation like the BFI, which has huge film and television collections. We've got literally millions of titles in our collection. But it's also, having a service like that has impact on the staffing that we have in the building. And what we don't have is really sort of siloed departments that are working on this, interestingly. The sort of curators who are working with the archival material are really working in quite a symbiotic way with the digital team, the team of developers that we have working on the program, the external consultants and so on, plus commercial specialists who are, you know, looking at ways to kind of exploit this service. Because, you know, like all cultural institutions, the BFI needs to make quite a lot of revenue. We get 25% of our funding from the government, but 75% of our funding comes from earned and raised income. So services like the Player are kind of really important. So yeah, it's now on subscription service. You can download the app on your Samsung TV. You know, there's a range of titles, both kind of recent releases, kind of, and more historical classic film titles, but all very much in the indie space. Plus this excellent resource of archival material, which really sort of tells the story of the history of Britain on film, which is wonderful. So I think, to answer the question specifically, I think it's about bringing together those services within institutions. Like so often I see that the sort of marketing and comms department at the Tate might be developing some really interesting material kind of online over here, but how well that interfaces with what the curators are doing in their collections, the temporary exhibitions program is sort of, it can be hit and miss. The Tate have actually been doing some good things kind of over the years. In fact, their digital teams have been developing projects like the big Chris Milk kind of is it Enchanted Forest project, but they developed that idea and then realised it as an exhibition. I'd like to see those teams coming together, but also kind of digital teams actually having more impact on the space for themselves.
Yeah, very good. That's really helpful. I mean, I agree with you in the Tate. I think they're really interesting. I think broadly, I look at any organisation is doing this well, and that ability to bring teams across the organisation and work really well seems to be quite key. Conrad, thanks. Tom, one thing that you'd love to sort of see, a sort of dream that you've got of how we function and how we interact with arts and culture in both a sort of physical and digital space. I mean, we'll stop talking about digital spaces at one point, but for the moment, for our conversation, one thing you dream of, one thing you'd love to see, or one thing you think is going to happen?
Well, I think ultimately, I mean, I'm not really from the arts world, so I don't know too much about how to sell tickets to things. I mean, I do see when you look at sort of how installation art is gaining popularity, that bringing people into spaces is becoming particularly important, and then activating those spaces in different ways. And I love installation art and this kind of interactive, immersive stuff. Obviously, that it appeals to me. I sometimes wonder whether art galleries are going to become a bit like highbrow fun fairs, but what I think actually is going to happen, and again looking at sort of virtual reality, is that I think it's really interesting that we're going to create new spaces. I mean, part of I like going to art galleries is because I like going to the space, and obviously the space plays a very important thing for art where it's shown, but it also is a limiting factor. It's a constraint about the art, and I think virtuality really gives an interesting opportunity to create new spaces. There's already digital art galleries, which I think there's one called Panther Modern, where they commission specific digital art that they basically create a new room for each new piece of art. But I think obviously with the emergence of these kind of technologies, and again I'm just talking about what I really know, is that I can see that you could enter like a virtual version of the Tate Modern, but then you could add new rooms to it. You could make the rooms change to adapt the art. The art will be informed by the space because they can change the space, and you'll be able to access this from anywhere in the world. So I think that's inevitable. I think it's really a question of what the timeline is. Is it 3 years, 5 years, 10 years?
Interesting. I like the idea of bringing, I love the idea of bringing spaces and making new kind of venues out of those. One of the things that Nesta's worked on is a project bringing a park and essentially commissioning art for a park on a virtual layer. And particularly, that was particularly working with school groups, but it's really interesting to see children very happy, interacting with a park in a totally different way. As a young person, I found parks, basically if they didn't have swings, I found the most unbelievably boring places in the world. And my parents had a kind of, propensity to walk around gardens in National Trust properties, and it was the most boring hours of my life as a young person. Really interesting to see children engaging with this park in Southend because of virtual layer that was built. And I think, what does that mean for Derby City Centre? What does that mean for, Brockwell Park? Anyway, interesting. Thank you. Anthony, something you'd like to see, something you think is going to happen in this world of us becoming essentially cross-platform in the way that we consume art and culture?
That's an enormous question, isn't it?
I know, I'm sorry.
I think a more rigorous way of thinking about it is a good start. So, you hear an awful lot, and I've received 1,000 proposals for digital arts type activities over the course of the last year or so, and most of them, if they use the word digital too much, then I say no. If they use the word platform, then I probably say no. And if they use the words digital and platform together, I absolutely say no, because none of them know what that means. The use of those terms indicates a lack of real understanding of what you're trying to do, which is something to do with users' behaviour, or, I hate the word users, it sort of conjures up this sort of crack den sort of thing as a term. But so there's just getting away from the all things can be improved by technology mindset, because it's simply not true. And into something which is about taking stuff away and understanding the core of an idea, just old-fashioned creative direction and commissioning that says, no, actually, it doesn't get better If you're going to, take an example of mine. If you're going to watch an opera, if that's the sort of thing you want to do, it is not improved by Twitter. That experience is not improved by being able to tweet at the same time. It may be that you want to be able to. It may be there is additional, some other kind of experience, but the core experience is not improved by that. So that's fine. Now, I wouldn't ban Twitter, but I wouldn't obsess about it either in that context. However, there are lots of things which are. Football is greatly improved by Twitter on the grounds that it's mostly nothing happening almost the entire time. In 90 minutes in which 11 minutes of interesting stuff happens if you're lucky, that should not be what most operas are like. It is quite often, but it's not supposed to be. So sort of getting away from this kind of rather facile idea, which is usually coming from policymakers or technologists who are usually trying to sell you something. My kind of core, and I am a technologist to some, my core assumption about technologists is what are they trying to sell me? Because they are. And so it's sort of getting away from that facile sort of thinking, which has given us a lot of pilots and a lot of sort of trendy, cool things, but not a lot of systemic change. Not a lot of change in behaviour in the funding organisations, not a lot of change in behaviour of the institutions that are involved. Take the BBC as a core example. The BBC is a decade behind, in my view, where it should be in terms of delivering public value through the potential of these technologies. And that is a big problem for them and the country. So getting past that, I think, will be really important into institutions. And I think that's actually the thing, the really significant bit. It's about leadership. It's about artistic leadership, but it's also about strategic leadership. It's about political leadership. And it's about people actually clearing the way for new things to come through. Nobody asked the black cabbies permission to create Uber. There wasn't a great capacity building program with black cabbies about utilising the internet, which is what there would have been in the arts. There was a thing. What do you think about Uber? There was a full stack solution, which was, how do we fix the thing about going home late at night in a car? Using technology. It was not. How do we make black cabbies more efficient? And so that kind of mindset that goes, what are we trying to do that is formally known as art or culture? And I take a very broad definition of culture. Raymond Williams, the philosopher, described it as everyday lived experience. So in spite of having produced operas, I also have worked on football clubs. So I take that view of it. That leadership thing. So it's kind of our job to clear the way for the people who actually know about this stuff. Because if you are, as we are, children of the Clive Sinclair, BBC B micro generation, we are John the Baptist. We are not it. Yeah. We are John the Baptist to clear the way and get the institutions and the money to work in such a way that people who genuinely don't understand what we are talking about, because they're just making it and experimenting with it, have the chance to do that with the money, with the institutions and with the structure, so the institutions don't wither. And so I think that's the next 5 years of my public policy life is trying to help that happen on the way through and help the institutions develop. And institutions don't develop mostly because mostly they're about defending. They're mostly about defending what they were.
Okay, very good. Well, that will take us on to risk. Conrad?
Yeah, I mean, can I pick up on that? Because one of the things I'm really interested in is sort of subject range for kind of institutions. I mean, obviously, you go to an institution like the Tate and you're predominantly looking at kind of fine art, photography, sculpture, digital media. But, for me, there are a whole range of kind of 20th and 21st century art forms that sort of aren't being addressed in institutions, which is why I mentioned video games kind of for starters there. But also I've done a lot of work around digital animation. I was involved in doing a big sort of, 20th anniversary show of the DreamWorks studio kind of before I left Australia. And, just thinking about how one would address that kind of art form and the creative impact of it within the gallery space was a really sort of exciting kind of challenge. The visual effects industry is huge in the UK. I mean, it's I work just near Charlotte Street, and the home of the film industry in London, and you walk a little bit further west, and you come across companies like Framestore and Double Negative and so on who are employing large numbers of staff and running international kind of operations. And there's a strong synergy between video games, digital animation, and visual effects, which I find really interesting. But there are no cultural institutions that are really kind of addressing those areas, and yet they're all very familiar to us and kind of our daily life, and the films we go and see, the games we consume, et cetera, et cetera. I think institutions have got to really sort of think more about their subject range. I'm really pleased that the V&A is kind of working on a big kind of sort of survey of video game design, which is kind of very exciting, kind of following on from their kind of Bowie show and Hollywood costume shows like that. But and also kind of other institutions are beginning to kind of look at the sort of historical kind of impact of digital media kind of over time. So Omar Khalif is just about to kind of launch this big show at the Whitechapel Art Gallery called Electronic Superhighway, which would be a really exciting kind of survey. So things are beginning to change, but I don't think there are enough kind of knowledgeable curators in institutions, kind of in major institutions in the UK, to address a lot of these subjects. So I think skills is a real issue. Very pleased to see institutions like the National Video Games Arcade opening in Nottingham, which is a sort of fantastic innovation, but again, sort of with limited funding, and so there's stuff happening. But
very good, thank you. Listen to the floor. Either thoughts around what we're going to see in inclusion of digital platforms and our physical experience, and those becoming more unified, for us. So either stuff that people have seen that is really interesting, or things that people are going to see, or questions you've got for the panel. So hands in the air so we can get a microphone to you. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Guy. I'm the founder of Zealous. I thought that there was a very interesting point about the fact that spaces are becoming digital, and we're kind of modeling physical spaces within the digital world.
Yeah.
One of the conversations we had yesterday was about the fact that we have no space to create within London anymore. So it's almost forcing us to go online.
Yeah.
But there's also this fascinating thought in my head, which is, will we actually still have conversations like this in 10 years' time? Will it just be ubiquitous? Will people just assume that digital is art and that gaming is within the arts?
Okay, interesting. Really, really interesting. I mean, obviously our hope is yes, but I mean, as Conrad said, there's some barriers. There's some risk stuff. There's some skill stuff. There's some structure stuff. There's some finance stuff.
I think probably we've all kind of gone beyond
using
that.
Your mic.
We've all gone beyond that, kind of, I think, as panellists. That we probably do feel all this stuff is art and therefore completely acceptable to show in our cultural institutions. But I think there's a long way to go for kind of the institutions themselves. Actually, I think the audiences have really already accepted this. I did the video game show in Melbourne. We got 120,000 visitors. Digital Revolution had 100,000 visitors at the Barbican. It's touring around the world and getting huge audiences. So I think people that are kind of familiar with this world are really sort of delighted to come and see more of it in cultural institutions and online. But the institutions are playing catch up a little bit, I think.
Okay, very helpful. Tom?
Yeah, I was just thinking whether it's this whole question about is something presented as art or not. And obviously, arts institutions are very much geared around traditional art forms, and as a painter, you expect your stuff to be shown in the gallery, and so you present it as art to be shown in the gallery. And then with a lot of these other art forms, like games, for instance, that's not their first port of call, is to go to the gallery and say, "Hey, I produced a game, please show my game." They put it online. They take it directly to the audience. And it is art. Well, you can have that debate, but I believe it's art. I think everyone here would agree. But they don't. That's not their obvious route. So maybe it's the purpose of institutions to try and get themselves involved in that world, because it's not necessarily coming to them.
Yeah, which of course is where, Anthony, you've been taking the space.
I think that's right. That's what we've been trying to do a bit with the space. I was really interested in what your self-definition as not really an artist, because I used to chair Lighthouse in Brighton, and we commissioned the first commission for somebody called James Bridle, who you may have heard of, and he didn't think he was an artist, because he isn't. He's a critical thinker and creator and maker and all the things that formerly known as an artist. There's a sort of architecture of art, which is an interesting and different thing. And a lot of it's about academics and institutions and history, and it's all very interesting and valid, but it's not the only way of approaching the question. So if what you do has the functionality of art, it makes people criticise or aware of or bring a different perspective to their everyday lived experience. Does it matter if it's called art or not? Well, only if you're trying to fund it through the arts system, which is kind of where you are with the astonishing reflectiveness you got when you watched Gravity, the movie, about the human condition, and what I got when I heard Chris Hadfield speak about being in space. That is an artistic type experience. So I think there's something in there about that, but that's going to be a hard fight. It's rivalrous for money. There's only so much money to go round. Institutions are better at getting money and keeping it than individuals generally, and sort of changing the way these sort of systems work. So I think that's a big, exciting challenge. But it does also partly, I think it's not just about stuff with a plug on. It's also about the existing artistic leaders creating work that is responsive to the fact we live in a society that is heavily technologically engaged and getting critically involved in that. So if you look at, Josie Rourke at the Donmar putting on a production of Durran Matt's play The Physicists, which is about the responsibility of scientists to their societies. Well, actually, it could have been Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates. Responsibility of people generating advances to their society, same storyline. Or Rupert Gould doing Game On at the Almeida. You're starting to get a generation of artistic leaders. There's a lot of fringe and lower level activity. Starting to get a generation of artistic leaders who are confident in this area. And I worked with Josie for 2 years. She's pretty good, on the thinking behind it, and a brilliant theatre director. And so it's kind of that, and it's having the plays coming through, and it's having the films coming through. Everything seems to be about either transgender or AI this year in the BAFTAs I'm judging. There's a reason for that.
Interesting.
And so it's partly that kind of marinade of the wider culture being actually, able to cope with these topics.
Very good, very helpful, very helpful. Okay, yes, another question here, and
Hi,
then we'll
Louise
come to you.
Houghton, broadcast journalist hosting the festival today. I'm just thinking about generations and whether we should be addressing them differently, because the older generations are more likely to be going out and seeing performances, whereas the younger generations who've grown up in a digital world might be seeing things from a different point of view, and I wanted your opinions on that. So
Conrad, how do you deal with that at the BFI? I mean, you're right, there's some people at different levels, even we're at a particular place. Do you think about the BFI? Do you think that's helpful to think of categorising audiences?
I mean, we do. Yeah, I've thought about that a lot in various different roles. I mean, there is a real. I mean, obviously we're running a series of different platforms kind of at the BFI. So we have BFI South Bank, which is our analogue kind of cinema setup. We've got Player, which is obviously remote and online. You can download lots of content kind of through that. But it is an issue. I mean, BFI South Bank has quite an older demographic. The independent art house kind of movie venues sort of tends to be slightly older. It's sort of 50, 40 to 60, that kind of age range. So getting in a younger demographic is a real challenge for us. But we do that in a range of ways. We do a big event called Sonic Cinema, which is around the interface between kind of music and film, which has a very, very young kind of demographic. There are various kind of offers and discounts that we offer. So we've got like a kind of under 25 ticket scheme, which is £3 to come see a movie kind of in the evening at the BFI for a film that's not sold out. And I think some of those things are kind of really great incentives. Obviously, we use social media a lot to kind of publicise those sorts of schemes. So it's partly about content, but it's also about offers and the way that you speak to people kind of through social media.
Okay, very helpful. Tom, should we think of audiences as should we start to categorise audiences and think of them differently in terms of where they are in experience, age, consumption?
I think that's inevitable, isn't it? Because definitely just difference in generation. I was just thinking about what you were saying. I was wondering, typically sort of young people create their own art. They do it as a kind of group activity, and then as you get older, you become more institutionalized, or you get things become more serious. You have less time, and so maybe it's for institutions to really partner and get involved with grassroots stuff more, because you can see there lots of young people putting on like little pop-up performances, theatre, or doing meetups in groups. And you don't often see the large institutions involved in that then. But they could potentially do a lot to get involved and to help sponsor those things. And that might be a way of getting...
Very helpful, thank you. I'm going to take a question or comment from the lady at the back.
Hello. I'm Gillian Boddington from Body Data Space and working with Nesta as a co-curator of Future Fest. So I've been involved in this space a long time and I know Conrad's work, etc. So just wanted to say... a couple of things in agreement, but to ask for a little bit further discussion on how we actually do create and generate the right conditions and finances for true content experimentation and the creation processes out there. Because completely agree with what you're saying, Anthony, about the add-ons. you know, it's not, we can't just have add-ons, you know, it can't just be an opera with Twitter added on, and it can't, you know, and those are very obvious for all of us and for the audience, I think. And I really do believe we've got to look much more at that weave of how experimentalists work and how risk is taken in the commissioning and creation processes. We need content, whatever spaces are being developed, whether they're online or whether we do get more special spaces which actually can take all of the work that's been made. And I also agree, Anthony, with what you're saying about we've got great excellence and skills in the arts to deal with this experimentation and collaboration, interdisciplinary teamwork, specialists working together, things that the creative industries are just starting to learn, actually, are coming through from performing arts and other areas. But I don't see the funders reflecting any of this yet. The departments in the Arts Council, I've been working interdisciplinary for 20 years, and they're still, and Conrad would know this from my work, completely exactly the same as they were 20 years ago when we were told our work was too interdisciplinary. So we're still stuck in that, you know, absolutely, visual arts, literature, dance, theatre, etc. And yet internationally we are seeing really good amounts of money going into experimental projects at professional level for, say, 360 degrees work, which you mentioned too, Tom. Places like SAT in Montreal, 18 new commissions last year for 362-degree dome works. How come this isn't happening here? How come most of the money is going into digital access, digital business plans, efficiency, as you mentioned, Anthony, you know, marketing add-ons, and add-ons to institutionalise all typical forms, backing up what Louise was just saying. Where's the money going for actual new forms, for new audiences and younger audiences? I don't think we can just continue to give to institutions.
Very good. That's very helpful. I think we've heard a really compelling case for what is going to be the structure that support this, and you've put that absolutely brilliantly. Anthony, I mean, you experience this world on both sides.
You just described my life.
Both sides of the fence.
So I think that you couldn't put a bit of paper between you and me on that question. Look, I think it comes from something that was in the previous question, actually, to me, which is I don't think audiences are about demographics. I think they're about behaviours, first and foremost. You know, so one of the things I did at the Space when I was commissioning in the summer was try and work out what the hell would art look like on Twitter, or on Instagram, or on Tumblr, and how would you get the arts kind of funding of people to understand that as what they thought of as art. So, you know, by commissioning FKA Twigs at the Manchester National Festival to do a big thing on Tumblr, and it being quite successful, we started to open up through the Space a kind of angle on the problem, which said, no, actually, it sort of looks a bit like art because it's not, and we had to define it against things like, it's not selling her album, it's not doing this, it's not doing that, so it is actually got an artistic intention. I think it's about intention. I did a piece, we've not published it yet, maybe Nesta can do it, about kind of digital and artistic intention as distinct from marketing. I think the Space, interestingly, and this is why I accepted the invitation to go and help sort it out, is the first attempt to try and look at what an entity might need to do to be the sort of thing you're describing. It's been very, very imperfect so far. I think it's a little bit better, but I think it's still going to tend towards distributing material and extending, and find it much more difficult to operate in the commissioning, what I think the Arts Council would still call born digital, which I detest as a term, but that kind of work. Conversely, the project that we're developing with Terry Gilliam, the National Film Board of Canada, are all over. I think it's a marvellous idea, and it's interactive, and it's narrative, and all this other stuff. So I think there's a long way to go. Positively, there are quite a lot of conversations starting to open up, including with BFI, with the BBC, and other institutions about that way of thinking about this, that might start to look at commissioning in this space. The problem is they don't know what it is. So the other challenge I had at the Space, and I deliberately sort of framed it this way, was coming up with really great projects nobody could say yes to, and then being able to go, so why can't we say yes to this amazing situated game with an online extension by these award-winning people? What's wrong with the structure, including the Space, that means we can't fund that? Because that would be fucking brilliant. Yeah. Why can't we fund that?
Very good.
Is a good question.
Very good. Thank you. Conrad.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of institutions are kind of risk averse. I mean, the commissioning I've done has been within very specific kind of constraints, which has always been around ticketed shows, in which there's a kind of real, powerful kind of business model. You know, you have a budget, you need to sell tickets to actually pay that investment back. You know, and I think it's but in each case, in each of those big shows, we've always allocated money from the big exhibition budgets for commissioning new work, and I think it's really important to do that, but also to sort of believe in that component of the budget, to not be safe, but to try and take risks where you can. I mean, with the Digital Revolution show, I mean the Mbryonic piece that I was talking about earlier on was a major kind of investment from the Barbican. It's very risky kind of work. It's all new technology. Hadn't been we tested it in the building, but it had never been tested as a durational kind of exhibit. So, it was challenging. I mean, I think big art centres are used to taking kind of big risks because they run concerts and theatre and so on, which are even more expensive than exhibitions sometimes. But I think there is that mindset within institutions. But it's and within those sorts of projects, there is a sort of clear business model. So they're workable. Those shows are made for audiences in London. They tour around, etc., and gain income kind of over time. And it's sort of a little bit more analogous to the commercial art gallery kind of network in a sense. But yes, I mean, I'm well out of the Arts Council kind of funding world these days. I mean, and thinking more about how we as the BFI can kind of innovate within the film space. And certainly part of my role at the BFI is to look at a lot of new creative technologies like VR, like mixed reality, and to think about how those can kind of be used creativity by filmmakers.
Very good, thank you.
Can I just ask quickly, though, just as maybe this isn't an answerable question, but how do we get someone like Blast Theory to be working with 800,000, not 100,000? They've been around 25 years. Yeah. They are our pioneers. Yeah. We have an international equivalence all over the world. But in Britain, that set of people have just not been enabled. The money's at the institutional
I think it's horizons
level.
of the funders. I mean, I totally 100% agree with you. I mean, it's why getting things like the space right is really important.
It is, but it's also, it might not be the right question, in a way, because, Punch Drunk can do it, and did, by not continuing to innovate. Matt Adams is a really good friend of mine at Blast Theory. Matt doesn't want to be that, and that's fine.
Yeah.
So... No, I'm not saying that necessarily, but I'm saying it's a kind of calibration, as Conrad is saying, of how much innovative risk you want to take with audience behaviour. How far out do you want to go? And you don't have to sell out. It's not a one or the other. It's not Punch Drunk, 80 quid a ticket in New York, or nothing. But I think there is something about what the artistic intention of the individuals concerned is. Now, I would totally love to get Blast Theory's work more widely seen, but it's got to be sort of balanced with what their ambitions are. Now, that said, there are plenty of other examples. I'm not denigrating Matt because he's a friend and they're wonderful, but there are plenty of other examples where there's still no structure to support them.
Understand. Okay. Anthony, brilliant. I just want to take if there is one final question. Yes, there's one question or comment.
Yeah, more than a question, it's more a comment.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Valentina. I work for Zealous, and I'm the marketing director, but I'm also a digital strategist, and I create digital art. And the problem I feel the most is that there is really not an understanding of what's going on, and to follow what Tom say of giving more space to actually young artists, young generation, because what is happening is that the way we make art and we think about art is changing due to the internet and software and digital technology. So now you have lots of young artists that for them it's just normal to produce animated GIF, videos and things like that. Yeah. And the institutions are not ready for this, which is a massive problem because, like perhaps the show at the Barbican, the one with the video games and other things, I thought was okay, I must say. But the problem I had with that is that it included an old generation of people that they're working on digital art since the 60s and the 70s, which is good to include them and to make everybody aware of what has been done in the past. But what are we doing now? Where there's plenty of projects out there, many artists working with digital art, and I think that is not addressed. And the problem I feel is that you have old generation working with a museum and institution that don't really understand That's another problem with that, is that often you have a digital department, which they led by developer and things like that, that often has to do a little bit of digital curation due to the lack of resource and finance, and that is a massive problem. We need to hire and create new role, like employ digital curator, people that understand what digital means, and help that dialogue within the audience, and also give funding to small organization and artists as well.
I agree. I mean, I agree 100%. And Tom, I think what you said was really, powerful. The ability of institutions to engage with actually what's happening at grassroots level. So in the final 30 seconds, because you've been very generous with letting us overrun, in the final 30 seconds, just one thing we could do that would just help us connect with the really interesting stuff that is actually happening at grassroots level. So, in thinking of policymakers, senior leaders, and all of that kind of lack of knowledge, one thing that we could do that would just pull us in from each of you, please, Tom.
I think, just thinking, maybe more smaller type budgets for small little projects, because I think big institutions like to invest big and they want to bring people into space, and so it's a big budget. But actually, to support grassroots things doesn't actually require that much budget. So you're reducing the risk. Just let's have more money going into that kind of.
Brilliantly put. Thank you, Conrad.
I think I'd go for something big and create a big new national institution that was responsible for showcasing this kind of work, kind of in a big city, kind of in the UK, and put some big public investment around it.
Amazingly successful. Thank you.
I think I would totally back Conrad's idea in that sense, and not a version of an existing institution. So one of the big challenges with the space is it's a joint venture between two institutions, neither of whom know really what they want, but they both know they want something. Yeah. And so you need something that's centred on this. So I'd buy that. That actually wasn't what I was going to say. I think I'm in between. I'm also in between the two of you. I think if we had 30 amazing producers, which we don't, by the way, because I've been trying to hire them for the space. If we had 30, and with jobs and money and budget, if we had 30 amazing producers who had been trained, mentored, were on a programme of work, that would be enough to build a kind of flying wedge to get this stuff into the mainstream, because the small stuff never cuts through. Sorry, it's lovely and interesting and innovative. It doesn't cut through with the kind of thinking that's needed here. You need really great people to help the artists and develop them along, because most artists can't do that on their own, and most small institutions can't do that on their own. And we hear a lot of talk about partnership and matchmaking and all these other things. Tim, you run a scheme. A partnership is not meeting in a room saying we all get on. A partnership is the hard yards when you don't get on. Yeah. And that's what producers are about, bringing things in, tightening things up, shaping things. And if we had a programme that was able to get really good people through, the Claw Leadership Foundation is doing an amazing job of improving arts management in this country. Where's our version of that? Because that would be what you need in the institution anyway. That's really central to this, to really have this group of very credible people who we can clear the way for.
Very good. Guys, thank you so much. For those in the audience, I'd like to thank you for your energy and participation. Do continue the conversation with these guys after. Continue the conversation on Twitter. And I'd like you to join me in thanking what I hope is the next board of management of an amazing new venue that will be homed, perhaps in an amazing city with a terrific budget behind it. So join me in joining what I hope is the management board of that new team. Tom, Conrad and Anthony.